This could be a fun little exercise to try. And so if you feel into the stuckness, you want to label what it feels like inside of you. Are your feet in cement? Is there a weight on your shoulders? How does the stuckness manifest in your body? And if you can describe it, you're going to bring it up.
What is up, everyone? Welcome back to my channel. Well, here's a question for you. Have you ever felt stuck or unable to let go of the past? If so, you're going to absolutely love this next video, this conversation I had today with my naturopath, Dr. Kristina Kastelanac. Kristina is not only a naturopathic doctor, she's also a somatic experiencing practitioner, a medical intuitive, and the creator of Body-Wise Insights, which is a program that helps people connect more deeply with their bodies in order to bring healing and joy into their lives. Now, if you have any questions for Kristina or myself about letting go of the past, somatic therapy, emotional triggers, or anything else that we talk about today, make sure you drop them down in the comments. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with one of my very favorite people, Dr. Kristina Kastelanac. So Kristina, welcome. I'm so excited to talk to you today. And the reason that I called you in for this conversation is because I had this very interesting question come up in my Patreon community. And the moment that I read it, I knew that you were the person that I needed to consult in terms of bringing through an answer. So here's the question, and then let's talk about it. The question is, how can I let go of the past? I've tried so many things, but I still feel frozen at age 19 as a result of a traumatic experience. And I'm turning 58 in March. So, right? So this is such a common experience, or at least it seems to be, in the sense that so many of us have these experiences in our past, whether they're stressful or traumatic. And no matter what we do, we try all sorts of things, and we can't seem to let go of these past experiences. So let's talk about that. What are your thoughts? What are your insights?
Well, first of all, thank you for this conversation and bringing this to me. I feel very happy and grateful to be here with you and talking to you. I love you deeply, and so it's lovely to be here.
Oh, thank you.
Secondly, what comes to mind when you ask that question is that there are layers to everything that happens to us, especially a traumatic event that's set place in any time in your life. Because of the way trauma is, it's typically something that occurs fast, that we didn't have any control over, and we couldn't escape it in some way. We couldn't get out of it. And so we had to endure it. And so there are many layers that get locked in to our physiology because we didn't get to enact the full fight-flight response, the stress response that we have when safety is threatened. We want to be able to move through something of high intensity and use these responses and then kind of let go of anything that's left. But if a trauma occurred and we didn't have the opportunity to do that, there's actually many, many layers. And so when you ask others to help you to heal, when you go to professionals, when you go to healers of any kind, you're touching on the different layers. And perhaps they're helping you to peel or address some of the layers, but that doesn't potentially feel satisfying enough. And often it takes us to look inward to the body and notice what's locked in our own physiology. And once we get to do that, we see how much density is there, how many layers are there. And then we get to unravel that and call in practitioners as needed. But we get to take ownership of all the different pieces that there are involved in that trauma and then unwind it. And sometimes there's earlier traumas linked into later traumas because they all coincide. There's beliefs that are layered into all the things that happen to us. And so sometimes you're working on one layer and another layer shows up, and you need to address that before you can go back to what your core wounding, what you feel you really want to work on more and more. And so it's really this journey of going over and over and over, but not necessarily going over and over in your mind or in the story. It's more going over and over in the body until all the charge is sorted through, all the charge is being worked through, and then there's not much left. Then your perception changes. Your perception of the event changes because there's no more charge in you to rub up against that memory.
Right. So, oh my gosh, this is going to be such a good conversation. So let's talk about charge, because that brings up one of my questions that I want to talk about, this notion of emotional triggers, right? We hear that. We hear people say that, oh, I'm triggered, right? Yeah. But what does that actually mean? Because when you say charge, that's what I think of. So let's talk about emotional triggers and what they are and how they are interlaced with this notion of a stressful or a traumatic event, I guess.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that there's still a lot of unanswered around that. But when I work with it with patients and when I work with it with somatic work, you can think of, like, sometimes the emotional charge is stored in the tissues, in the cells. You can think of it that way, perhaps, right? So this is where sometimes there's movement therapies, right? And so you're moving particular parts of the body, maybe the fascia stretches, maybe the muscle stretches, maybe the joints are opening. And that's where you feel perhaps some release of emotion come out or through. So you're stretching tissues and things change. So that could be one idea of how emotions are stored in our physiology. But also when something comes from the external environment and it triggers you, it is bumping up against something inside of you, a nervous system response, but it is unconscious to us. So I'll give this example. Say, for example, you were in a motor vehicle accident and it happened so fast. A car came out of nowhere and it was this white SUV and it just, bam, ran right into you. And every time after, when you drive, anytime you see a white car, your heart starts to beat faster. Your muscles start to tense, but you're not even perceiving the white car that's parked right next to you in the parking lot, but your system is, your peripheral, your eyesight is, your brain is, but you're not actually drawing awareness to it. And so then you're sitting in the parking lot ready to drive, and it's 3 years later, and there's that white SUV that's right there in the same shape and size, same color. And it's that stimulus given to your nervous system that triggers the response, but it's unconscious to you, or it can be conscious. But then no matter what, you're still having that nervous system response. So once it bumps up against something inside of you, that's something for you to unwind within yourself, to renegotiate within yourself. To me, that's why it's showing up. It's showing up so that it can heal. Mm-hmm. We can think of it as, a detriment to our lives. Like, here I am, I have to deal with this now. But I think of it as an opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And communication, right? I'm just thinking of, I had a hypnotherapy session last week, and one of the things that came through from my higher self, the hypnotherapist had asked, okay, can we do some healing now? And my higher self said, no, because the body is trying to communicate something. And if we do the healing before the communication is received, then that's not acknowledging that there's this communication. So I'm just thinking of that in relation to our physical symptoms, and also even this trigger response of this emotional response or this nervous response. It's like, if we don't acknowledge that, then we're missing the communication that's trying to take place on this deeper level. I don't know, that just came to mind.
I love that. Yeah, and I mean, that is half. So when a communication occurs, it's actually our brain that's trying to get in line with what the body is sensing. It's the body communicating with the brain, or the brain communicating with the body. We can think of it as that too. Mm-hmm. And that will help us to build more and more awareness around the pieces, the layers that are unhealed or untouched as of yet. So it is a beautiful thing to keep being aware of what is being communicated within you.
Right.
For
Because
sure.
often, when we have triggers, I'm thinking of my experience, especially before I started working with you, by the way. But usually when we're triggered, what happens is that we just have this emotional reaction, right? There's just this reaction and there's not an acknowledgement of the communication that's trying to take place. And oftentimes too, the reaction is so much bigger or greater than the actual event. Like you say, if you just, okay, here's this white car beside me. Like that doesn't seem to an outsider looking in. That wouldn't seem like a big deal. And yet our bodies and our emotional system, like there's this huge reaction. So I guess that's a sign. I guess what I'm hearing is like, this is how you tell if there's something that you need to be looking at within, that maybe you've had something stressful or trauma happen that you haven't quite worked through on a somatic level.
Yeah, I agree. If the internal charge doesn't match the external issue, then it's from a past event, likely. And then you need to actually sit with that and bring up in your awareness, where does this really come from? And if you already know, like it sounded like the person that wrote that question already knew kind of like this big wounding that occurred, and and everything in her life sort of cycles around that. So she knows what to address or focus on. And so in that instance, you can take time and space to address it every single day. If you know how to just be with the body and allow the sensations, emotions, thought patterns, and things the body wants to do, if you allow all those pieces to show up, right? Instead of, let's say we might perceive that, the white car being there, it's no big deal. Why am I, and then you judge yourself, and then we shut it down.
And you have the shame. Like then you're shaming yourself for your reaction, and you're adding another layer on, essentially.
Yes. So a lot of the work I do is like, okay, let's just be with, it's okay. Like this huge response is okay. We know that this is just your system. It's not you. It's not who you are. It's just something stored in your physiology. Let's be with it for a moment. Right. And often the charge will drop quite significantly if we just let it be there. And then it communicates with you. Right. Then the communication comes. And actually, in that instance, communication is healing.
Right. Totally. Because you understand. Maybe you understand yourself a little bit more deeply, and you have more compassion and more love. Just as you're talking, I'm just aware that culturally we have this pattern of when difficult emotions show up, there's definitely a pattern of just smushing them down or just like pushing them away, or especially I think with men and boys, but I think you could say across the board. So there's this pattern of like shutdown, and that, would you say that locks it in even deeper? Or like what happens when we have something surface like these triggers and then we don't sit with them? Like what happens then? Because I think that's so common.
Yes. And especially if that becomes a nervous system pattern.
Right.
Damaging piece is whenever emotions show up, or whenever sadness, particular emotion shows up, I do this. And then that creates the same pattern over and over again. And that can hinder relationship with self and other, and so on. And so it's more if it's done repeatedly, right? If it's a pattern, then that is going to hinder your life. But if it also happens one time in a high intensity moment, that can store the trauma in a particular way too. So you really needed to be heard and listened to in that moment, but the support wasn't there, meaning it got squashed because you really wanted it, but it wasn't there, right? And again, that will create a nervous system pattern of feeling like you weren't supported, or they weren't there for you, or on. So,
right.
Yeah. So definitely that can become patterns in different ways.
So along with that, I'm just thinking also that maybe what would be helpful is to talk about the nervous system a little bit, and to talk about what the nervous system is, and then these different, responses of the nervous system when we're exposed to stress or trauma. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So the way that the nervous system works overall is, I like to describe it in the form of dials. So if you can imagine, you have 3 dials in front of you. We've got one dial, and it's the sympathetic dial. So it's the dial that mobilizes us for fight and flight. And so if that dial is turned up, it means that someone is chasing us, or there's a deadline, or whatever. We feel the fight or flight really coming up. We have this middle dial. We call this the ventral vagal dial. And it is in charge of this social engagement piece, this piece of connecting to others. And as we connect to others, if we smile at them, if we feel safe with them, then this dial turns up. When this dial turns up, the sympathetic dial might turn down a little bit. So the moment you're in a tense discussion with a loved one or a colleague, and they lighten the mood with a joke, or they have a little smile on their face, that brings the tension down, right? So your system might be ramping up. Here it is. There's this conflict. This always happens with us. We always argue about this. And then they kind of just smile, and it can kind of diffuse the situation. So those are 2 dials that are working together.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have this third dial, and it's the parasympathetic state. So this, when it's turned down lower, you've got this rest and digest sort of piece. And when it's all the way up, you've got freeze. And so if the sympathetic dial is supercharged high, the ventral dial, the middle social engagement dial, is dialed down really low, then this third dial will go all the way up. It will go to freeze eventually. If this sympathetic fight-flight charge is so high and you can't do anything to escape, we freeze. And so the moment that you have this middle dial, this social engagement piece, come up a little bit, this dial might come down. The sympathetic charge comes down, and then we can slide into that rest and digest again. So it's these 3 dials that are constantly in our day moving up and down in various ways in relation to whatever you're experiencing internally and externally. And we have usually our set points of what occurs and how they are positioned. But if you can start to get to know what these are doing inside of you, you can start to have an intention around wanting something different, you know? And also there's no good or bad or right or wrong around any of these dials. Like, even if you have high sympathetic charge, one person could interpret that as excitement and be like very extroverted and full of passion. I want to just grab life by the balls and live it, you know? That's like this high sympathetic charge. To other people that are highly sensitive, it might be like, whoa, whoa, whoa.
Like anxiety or something.
Yeah, that would create anxiety in someone else. And so it's really your interpretation of what charge is doing inside of you, right?
Does that have anything to do with, because I'm just thinking when we experience these stressful or traumatic events, what I'm seeing in my mind, and tell me if this is accurate, is that those dials get kind of stuck in relation to that event somewhere physiologically, and they're
totally.
That makes sense. And so perhaps our perception, like you're saying, our perceptions can vary. I'm curious if our perceptions are perhaps related to what is stored from those past events. Like if something scary, this is just an example that I'm thinking of. If something, if a trauma or a stressful event was related to something really loud, and we have that fear response or that maybe freeze response, then perhaps later in life, again, we're experiencing something that's like too loud or something, and then our dials kind of reset to that same point because it's physiologically. Does that make sense? That's just
completely
what I'm seeing in my head as you're talking. Okay.
Oh yeah, I see that all the time. I actually feel that in my own physiology all the time. And I'm sure people do, you know, anyone that kind of like, let's say they have a good day, right? They have a good day and they walk in the house. And if they had that trigger of like high noise or whatever, or a loud noise, if they walk in the house and the kids are screaming, they might even be having fun, but it's just like screaming and it hits you. You can feel the shift inside of you.
Yes, definitely.
It can be tempered. So if you are in a parasympathetic state enough and you can feel into it and expansive enough, when something hits you, it might not impact you in the same way as if you were already stressed out, you're already run down, and then the kids are screaming. It's like, wow, then it would tax you, right? It would send you into even deeper of a nervous system pattern like, you're used to when that state occurs.
Right.
So, there's varying degrees of it, but I agree with you. Like as soon as that stimulus comes in, those knobs can reset into that past pattern.
Okay. So as you're speaking, the other thing that I'm aware of is that often when people, when this question comes up, how can I let go of the past? Often that's reflective of a feeling that people are stuck.
Right.
So they get into these stuck states where they want to make a positive change, and they probably even know what that positive change is. But, and that that I've experienced this myself too. It's like you cannot, or it feels like you cannot move forward. What are your thoughts on that? Because I'm thinking that maybe this stuck feeling is my dials are stuck in a place that's preventing me from actually moving forward or following my intuition or following my calling or choosing something that's healthier. So my mind knows what's healthier, and I can feel, maybe I can even intuitively feel what would be healthier or what would be a good choice. And yet my physiology feels like it's keeping me stuck. So I know that that's common. And so when we get into that place of feeling stuck because of something from the past, and maybe we know what the trauma is, like, and we know that we want to work through it, what are some exercises, some somatic exercises that maybe we could do? Or what are your thoughts on how we actually start to, I'm seeing baby steps in my mind, like how do we start to like baby step it forward where we're starting to get unstuck?
Yeah. Well, you could try this out. Like this could be a fun little exercise to try. And so if you feel into the stuckness, you want to label what it feels like inside of you. Are your feet in cement? Is there a weight on your shoulders? How does the stuckness manifest in your body? And if you can describe it, you're going to bring it up. That might increase the intensity of it. So just be aware of that. And so you're going to feel the stuckness. You're going to describe what the stuckness feels like. And then you want to pendulate. So you could try this. You could try and say, what is the complete opposite to this? What is the complete opposite experience to the cemented feet or the weight on my shoulders? And you'll name whatever comes to mind. What's the opposite of that? Oh my gosh, I'm in space and floating around, and the moon is in the distance and the stars are there. And I'm just, wow. And so then you feel into the opposite experience and you notice what shifts in your body. Sometimes you aren't even able to go to the opposite. It's hard. Sometimes you are, but you can keep practicing. And that's you moving from one state to another state, one state to another state. And that's actually the healing journey. When you can shift from one state to another state back and forth, it creates kind of like, I liken it to like a ball of yarn that's so tight. If you practice going back and forth from super negative to super positive, you're pulling apart the little threads of yarn and you're creating some space to it. And then you can start to look at all the threads, look at all of the different tangles and deal with one tangle at a time. So that's one technique where you can just go from, oh yeah, I feel this, it's intense, and then do the opposite. Another one would be even in the body, you can sense like where the tightness lives or where the intensity is, where in the body physically is completely opposite. It actually holds the least amount of charge. So again, then you're bringing it more into processing in the body, and you can feel, okay, yeah, and in my knees, they actually feel quite loose. And And you might not have much perception around it. Like you might not have much experience around it because you just never focus on the stuff that doesn't feel yucky.
Right.
And
Totally.
to focus on the stuff that does feel kind of tense and uncomfortable. And so then as you focus on the piece that doesn't feel uncomfortable, even if it's just neutral, you can be with that and it softens things a little bit too.
Yeah. What I'm hearing with what you're saying is that, like, what's coming to mind is how we get locked into these patterns of sensation, again, that maybe are habitual, not necessarily the healthiest, but that's what we know. And our body tends to, or maybe it's more of our mind, maybe our mind and our bodies tend to gravitate towards this habitual, whatever is habitual feels, there's an element of safety in it. So I'm just going to keep keep doing that, even though like I can feel that's not my highest good or whatever it is, but this feels safe to me. So I'm just going to stay here. How do we move past those initial feelings of like, oh, I feel like this is better, but it's also really scary.
Yeah. Well, and that's the case with anything we learn that's new. Like think about the first time you, I don't know, played like pickleball, right? Like it's a new thing. Everyone's into it. Let's try it out. And it's this new skill that you have to build. And it's perhaps, it depends on how you approach newness, how you approach new things. For some, it's very scary. They'll shy away and they won't want to do it. For others, they'll be like, well, let me try this out and we'll see how it goes. And if they fail, it's like, forget it. I don't want to do it. Like we all have our tendencies when we approach new things. And so you got to get to know what's your tendency when you approach new things. Like I see it in my girls, the difference in approaching something new. And for kids, they're constantly approaching something new.
Definitely.
You know, and they have to figure out how to do it. And it's frustrating or it's hard. And so we go back to that comfort zone, like you said. So it requires energy to be able to do new things, new patterns. And if you don't have the energy for it, if you don't have the will and the motivation and this striving, this energy to do it, we don't do it. Because it is effortful at first.
Right.
Right? It can be. And then but sometimes it's demanded of us because it's so painful to be in the old. If it's painful to be in the old, we're like, forget this. I'm done. I need out. And it overrides the hardship of trying something new. Try it once and you say, oh my God, that was better. But then we always fall back again, and that is normal and common and natural, and never ever judge yourself for it, because that is pendulation as well. So you're striving, you made New Year's intentions and resolutions, we all probably have. You started off great, the exercise routine, the new diet, the whatever, and like you're doing it, you're feeling really great. And then after a couple of weeks, it's kind of like, gosh, I'm tired. Like, I'm tired of prepping all my food at once a week or whatever it is that you decided to do. And then we lean back on, no, I'm just going to go and watch nothing or whatever it is. Again, that's just one example of like, that's normal.
Yeah.
But the key is to catch yourself and say, here it is. And I'm going to take the night off or whatever, or I'm going to do it for this amount of time and then go back again and make the effort to do it when you feel restored.
Oh, that's a good point.
The system just wants to feel restored. You've taxed it by going outside your comfort zone. Some people love that space and want to just stay in it all the time and constantly transform it. That's beautiful. But a lot of people don't. And then you can just ease back. I had this happen to me recently where I felt really out of my comfort zone, push all month long. And then now I'm leaning back and being like, oh, I can feel that depressed feeling inside. It's familiar. I know it well. But also I'm like, I just need a break. Just need a break. And I'm just taking in the break and taking in all the good stuff about the break and letting go of the other pieces that are stuck to that as well. Like sometimes with patterns that we have in our physiology, there's like stuff that no longer serves us.
Right.
And so if you can start to name, like, I really like when it gives me this relaxed jelly feeling, but I don't like the heaviness, guilt feeling that comes along with it. You want to start breaking it down. Like, what are the things you like about that pattern? What are the things you dislike about the pattern? and you start to see how it serves you.
Mm-hmm. And what you're describing is really those layers that you were talking about in the beginning too.
Yeah.
Because what I'm thinking is like, so if you have this pattern of being overly critical or judging yourself or criticizing yourself, maybe you're not fully aware of that pattern yet. And so you tend to, when you give yourself a break, right, you're just giving yourself a break, but how your mind is perceiving it is like, you're giving up. Or like, you're a failure. You never stick to anything or whatever.
Yes, totally.
So noticing that pattern when it comes up and seeing all these layers that really ultimately you're dealing with. And in the end, having this space of this observer consciousness where you're maybe taking one step back and just noticing how my mind responds when I take actions in certain directions, because maybe it's not good, bad. Maybe it's just like I'm taking a step back from what I said I was going to do. That in itself is neutral. And your mind comes in with this, pattern of criticism or judgment or whatever.
And that happens a lot with emotions, actually.
Right. Yeah, totally. Yeah, I can see that.
Have this judgment around like, well, there's this emotion. Oh, it's because of this, or
yeah.
And you have to label it or put it towards something that's justified. And it's like, really, I mean, it's just an emotion that's showing up. A lot of the times I'm there in my room and just being like, let's just allow this emotion to be there. We don't have to make it good or bad or justify it in any way. And it's liberating to do that. It's just an emotion that's releasing through your body.
That is such a good point, because I feel like culturally there are these labels that come in. It's like if you're sad for a certain amount of time, then you're depressed, or if you're worried for a certain amount of time, then you have an anxiety problem instead. And so people are so afraid of these emotions because of what it means in terms of their identity, that rather than just letting the emotions flow through and process them, there's such an avoidance because we've been taught that if you feel this way or if you feel that way, there's something wrong with you.
Right.
So having that space to just feel what you're feeling and giving yourself permission to that, to actually feel that and process that, I just feel like it's so liberating if you're not attaching meaning to it in the way that our culture does.
Yeah, it's so true. And just to start recognizing that if that becomes a pattern of, oh yeah, I feel this sadness every time I'm driving, I start to cry. And that you're building that nervous system pattern of those tears and that crying. And then you get to assess for yourself, does that feel like a helpful pattern? Do I feel more energized and relieved afterwards? Or do I feel drained or, low energy afterwards? Like those are good indicators if the pattern's actually working for you or not working for you.
That's a really good point, because if someone has like a half an hour cry, some people might feel better after that, and some people might feel worse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good indicator whether patterns are working for you or not. If it makes you feel relief and energized, then this might, wow, that pattern really does serve me in some way, until it doesn't, right? That's the beautiful thing about the nervous system is it can constantly change and evolve. And we want to be able to keep assessing that and noticing what patterns no longer serve us so that we can try new ones and see how that serves us and move forward with that.
So that brings up a beautiful point, because it feels like in terms of quote unquote healing, there's often like an end point that everybody is trying to get to.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I'm healing, or like I'm in personal development, or I'm in like spiritual development, or whatever it is. And I think our minds kind of make up this end point that doesn't actually exist. Where like one day, whereas what I've kind of come to know is that, especially from working with you, is like, oh no, this is just an evolution that we're experiencing, and we are gravitating, in a certain direction, but it's not necessarily that it's a college degree that we're going to get one day, and it's like, oh, I'm healed, and we can hang that on our wall. So can you talk to us a little bit about this evolution of healing and what that is, and how you see that unfolding in people's lives and what that means to you?
Well, yeah, if you think about it as like multiple layers that create whatever the body is going through. So let's say a disease, right? You've been labeled to have a particular disease. That means there's many layers involved energetically mentally, emotionally, and then physically. Layers involved, diseases diagnosable.
Physically being the end, can we point that out? Physically being the last manifestation.
That's right.
The most dense manifestation, and the others being the more subtle levels, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
And so let's say you have an intention of healing that definition, that disease that you have labeled, right? You can address all these different layers and you can heal. You can reverse, right? Diseases, particular, some of them. I've seen many, and people say you can't. And I've seen things heal that many think can't be healed, right? And it's because you've addressed so many of the different layers that it starts to not be able to be manifest in physical form. And now, if that's your goal in life, and then you've done it, yay, hooray, like that, right? But then alongside that, you have all this plethora of stuff that you just sorted through, healed, but it shows up even this deeper wound that you never knew was an issue. And oh my gosh, and it's this whole other big thing, right? And that's going to continually happen as you evolve the healing journey. But to celebrate the fact that actually I did heal. I did heal from this or that or whatever. That's also important. So I think that there can be a lot of healing happening if you have an intention. You work towards it, and then it does manifest one day, but the next one will just come in.
Yes.
That's part of like just this human existence and this purpose we have.
Human journey.
Human journey. But I do feel like, at least for me, I've felt like the somatic work was able to unwind things that were trapped in my physiology from early childhood especially. And the more work I did on it, like after maybe 4 or 5 years, it felt like to me that I had like turned over. I would call it turning over my nervous system. It felt like I had turned over and kind of like completely created a new nervous system. And then I keep doing that, right? I feel like I'm at like 2.5 rotations, at this point, like 11 years into doing the somatic work. It's like I feel like I'm at about 2.5 rotations. And I think that'll just keep evolving. The beauty of that is things feel lighter. You get more done in short amount of time. The same trigger still shows up, but it's not as dense. The same trigger still shows up, but you deal with it just a little bit differently. And so then your relationships are a little healthier and the outcomes are a little healthier. It's not crazy, insane different, but it's different enough for you to know that, yeah, you know what, I've really changed. I've really shifted.
I definitely feel that. I mean, I think I've been working with you for 6 years now, or around that, 6 or around that time, but once a month. And so what I feel is this evolution towards authenticity. I feel like I'm more who I truly am, as opposed to, maybe conditioned beliefs, conditioned ideas, conditioned responses or whatever. I just feel like I'm more myself. And then the other cool thing about that is that my external life starts to reflect that as well. So things start to line up in terms of, I feel like I am more myself and I have the freedom and I can be more of myself. And then my external reality is also reflecting that, right? Instead of, because I just feel like in contrast, I mean, when I look out and when I'm working with people, I feel like many people are living their lives, but they're not really expressing their true authentic self. Their lives aren't 100% reflecting who they truly feel that they are inside. And then so we feel like there's something off. It's like this inner discontent where even if you've gone for all the things that our culture or our caregivers say that this is what you should want or this is what will make you happy, and then you go for these things, but if they're not really reflective of your authenticity, you're like, oh, this doesn't feel right. Or, right? So working with you, I feel like I've been shedding layers of who I'm not, right? And that's just how I perceive it. I know probably people perceive it in different ways, but it's a beautiful evolution.
I love that. That brings up the whole stuck piece, like that feeling of stuckness. It's like, if you don't name who you are versus who you're not. Like in that felt sense of who I truly am. If you can connect to her inside and then feel into what's presented to you around you and say, no, that's not me, or it is me. If you can face that, stuckness tends to start to evaporate, because stuckness is often a conflict, right? It's two opposing forces that are just there. And until you face it, it's just going to be there.
I'm just having an epiphany. Is it that like there's this pull or this desire to be yourself and express yourself, but there's this maybe somatic sensation that it's not safe yet to do so? Could that be part of the conflict? That
totally could
like,
be.
Yeah.
Completely. I could see that actually in one thread in my life.
Yeah.
Where you really want to be this particular way, but it feels like you have to follow the rules. The rules are a big thing for that, right? Or authority says you can't do this or you can't do that. And that feels so limiting, right? But the truth is I just want to burst out and say this and that and help. But I can't because of restriction, you know?
Right.
So anytime there's two opposing forces, that will create stuckness in the
and probably whatever the stronger force is in that moment is the one that is manifesting, you know, in your reality. And then this work is kind of, you know, untwisting all of those knots or ties, those entanglements that might be keeping you in a place you don't want to be.
Yes, totally. Yeah.
Well, Kristina, it was so awesome to talk to you. I feel like we could talk another hour, but I know you have to go, so maybe we'll save that for our next conversation. I'm sure I'll have you on again. But how can people contact you, get in touch with you? Tell us a little bit about your work and how we can get in touch with you.
Yeah, so I do have this beautiful Bodywise Insights business, and it is where I teach people how to listen to their bodies, how to work with the charge inside of them and renegotiate those fight, flight, freeze pieces. So I have a lot of content on YouTube and Instagram under Bodywise Insights, and also a website by that same name. And I run 2 group sessions, spring and fall, to help people learn. So it's an 8-week program where they can learn how, step by step, to listen to their own bodies, how to track the things that are showing up, how to actually work with them, release them, and move into that more connection with authentic self sort of piece that you mentioned. So I've been doing a lot of that the last couple of years, so people can check me out there. And I've also got my practice, but that's in London, Ontario. So you've got to be local to.
If you live in London, Ontario, I think it's Wortley Naturopaths. If they Google Wortley If you Google Wortley I'm always so conflicted on sharing you with people, though, because I'm like, I'm never going to be able to get an appointment. I know that's selfish. Selfish, everyone. But I'm like, I need my Kristina.
There's only so many hours in the day, right? Because my practice is very full at this point.
Exactly.
So I've been doing the group work and the online work so that I can get people in,
group sessions.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today. Much love to you. And we will talk again, have you back again, because there's a few other things I want to talk about. Mainly like past life healing is one of the things we didn't get to today, and a couple other things. So thank you so much.
I would love to.
All right. Much love to you. Thank you.
You too. Bye.